The blood on her wedding dress had long since faded to rust, but Felicity Foster still kept it folded in the trunk at the foot of her bed, a reminder of the 3 men who had loved her and died for the privilege. She stood now at the edge of Hot Springs, South Dakota, watching the steam rise from the natural thermal pools that gave the town its name, wondering if the 4th man would be fool enough to try his luck where 3 had failed so spectacularly. It was the summer of 1882, and Felicity had turned 26 years old 3 weeks prior, alone as she had been for the past 2 years since husband number 3 had met his untimely end. The town whispered about her constantly, their voices carrying on the wind like the sulphurous steam from the springs. Black Widow, they called her, though she had never harmed a soul. Cursed woman, Devil's bride. The names hurt less than they used to, but they still stung when she heard them in the general store or saw mothers pull their daughters away when she walked past, as if misfortune were contagious. Her first husband, Thomas, had been a banker's son from Philadelphia who came west seeking adventure. They married when she was 18, starry-eyed and convinced that love could conquer anything. 6 months later, his horse threw him during a thunderstorm, and he broke his neck on the rocks near Fall River. The second, James, was a rancher who promised her safety and stability. He lasted a year before a rattlesnake bit him while checking fence lines, and he died in agony despite the doctor's best efforts. The third, William, was a merchant who swore he did not believe in curses. He made it 8 months before a wagon wheel crushed him during an accident at his warehouse. 3 husbands, 3 deaths, all within 5 years. The pattern was impossible to ignore, and the town had drawn its conclusions. Felicity Foster was cursed, and any man who married her was signing his own death warrant. She had accepted her fate, or so she told herself. She ran a small boarding house now, inherited from William and kept to herself. She was still beautiful, with long copper-colored hair and green eyes that reminded people of mountain lakes, but beauty meant nothing when paired with a reputation like hers. Men avoided her gaze in the street. Widowers looking for companionship found other prospects. She was 26 and resigned to spending the rest of her life alone. That was before Preston Ellis rode into Hot Springs on a dust-covered bay gelding, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun, looking for a room and a hot meal. Felicity was sweeping the front porch of her boarding house when she first saw him. He was tall, with broad shoulders and the easy grace of a man who spent more time in the saddle than on his feet. His jaw was shadowed with several days' worth of stubble, and his blue eyes held the kind of directness that made her heart skip unexpectedly. He could not have been more than 28 or 29, she guessed, and there was something in the way he carried himself that spoke of confidence without arrogance. "Afternoon, madam," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that suggested Texas origins. "I am looking for a place to stay. Heard you run a boarding house here." Felicity tightened her grip on the broom handle. "I do. $2 a week, meals included. Room at the end of the hall upstairs is available." He dismounted in one smooth motion, leading his horse to the hitching post. "Sounds fair. Name's Preston Ellis. I will be working at the Reynolds Ranch north of town, helping with their horse breaking." "Felicity Foster," she said, and watched for the recognition to dawn in his eyes. It did not take long. She saw the moment he placed her name, saw the slight widening of his eyes, but to her surprise, he did not back away or make excuses. Instead, he extended his hand. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Foster." She hesitated, then shook his hand briefly. His grip was firm and calloused, the hand of a working man. "It is Miss Foster now, and I should warn you, Mr. Ellis, that I have a certain reputation in this town. You might want to find accommodations elsewhere." What kind of reputation? He asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. The kind where men die, she said bluntly. I have been widowed 3 times, Mr. Ellis. 3 husbands in 5 years, all dead within months of marrying me. The town believes I am cursed, and they might be right. So if you are looking for a quiet, uneventful stay, you should try the hotel on Main Street. Preston regarded her thoughtfully, then shook his head. I do not believe in curses, Miss Foster. I believe in bad luck, sure, and I am sorry for your losses. But I need a place to stay, and your boarding house looks clean and well kept. If you will have me, I would like to take that room. Felicity studied him, searching for signs of bravado or foolishness, but found only calm sincerity. Your funeral, she muttered, then caught herself. I mean, suit yourself. Come inside and I will show you the room. The boarding house was indeed clean and well maintained, with polished wood floors and curtains that let in the afternoon light. Preston's room was modest but comfortable, with a sturdy bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. He paid her for the first week and went to stable his horse, leaving Felicity standing in the hallway wondering what she had just agreed to. That evening at supper, Preston sat at the long dining table with the 3 other boarders. An elderly widow named Mrs. Calloway, a traveling salesman named Mr. Green, and a young schoolteacher named Miss Hartley. The conversation was polite but stilted, and Felicity noticed how the others kept glancing at Preston, clearly wondering if he knew about her history. Mrs. Calloway could not contain her curiosity. Mr. Ellis, you are new to Hot Springs. Are you planning to stay long? Depends on the work, Preston said, accepting a bowl of stew from Felicity with a nod of thanks. Could be a few weeks, could be a few months. The Reynolds Ranch has quite a string of horses that need breaking, and they heard I was good at it. You should be careful, young man, Mrs. Calloway said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. This house has a dark history. Mrs. Calloway, Felicity said sharply, that is enough. No, let her speak, Preston said easily. I would rather hear it straight than have people whispering behind my back. The old woman leaned forward eagerly. 3 husbands, Mr. Ellis, all dead within a year of marrying our landlady here. Some say she is cursed. Others say worse things. If I were you, I would not get too close. Felicity felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger. If you are uncomfortable living here, Mrs. Calloway, you are free to leave. Now, I did not mean any harm, Mrs. Calloway said quickly. I am just looking out for this young man. Preston set down his spoon and looked directly at the old woman. With all due respect, madam, I have been looking out for myself since I was 16 years old. I think I can judge who I want to be around, and it seems to me that Miss Foster here has had more than her share of grief without people adding gossip to it. The table fell silent. Felicity stared at Preston in surprise. No one had defended her in years. People either avoided her entirely or spoke about her as if she were not there. To have this stranger, this cowboy she had met only hours ago, speak up on her behalf left her momentarily speechless. Well, Mr. Green said, clearing his throat. This is excellent stew, Miss Foster. Is that sage I taste? The conversation moved on, but Felicity could not stop glancing at Preston throughout the meal. He ate with the appetite of a man who did hard physical work, and he complimented her cooking with what seemed like genuine appreciation. When the meal ended and the boarders dispersed to their rooms, he lingered to help her clear the dishes. You do not have to do that, she said as he carried plates to the kitchen. I know, but my mother raised me to be useful, and I do not like sitting idle. He set the dishes in the wash basin and leaned against the counter. Those people should not talk about you that way. They are scared, Felicity said quietly. I do not blame them. Sometimes I am scared too. Of what? "That you really are cursed. Of hoping again," she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. "Of thinking that maybe I could have a normal life and then having it all torn away again." 3 times, Mr. Ellis. 3 good men who did not deserve to die. Preston was quiet for a moment. "My father used to say that life does not give us what we deserve. It just gives us what we get, and we have to make the best of it. Your husband's deaths were not your fault." "How can you be sure? Maybe there is something wrong with me. Maybe I am bad luck." "You know what I think." Preston moved closer, and Felicity caught the scent of leather and sage on him. "I think that bad things happen sometimes, and people need someone to blame because it makes them feel like the world makes sense. But the world does not make sense most of the time. It is just chaos and chance, and you happen to get a raw deal." She looked up at him, at those steady blue eyes, and felt something stir in her chest that she had thought was dead and buried with William. "You should stay away from me, Mr. Ellis, for your own good." "I will take my chances," he said with a slight smile. "Besides, where else am I going to find cooking this good?" Over the following days, Preston settled into a routine. He left early each morning for the Reynolds Ranch, worked with their horses until late afternoon, then returned to the boarding house dusty and tired but always in good spirits. He took his meals with the other boarders, helped Felicity with small repairs around the house without being asked, and generally conducted himself as if he had no awareness of her supposedly cursed status. The town noticed, of course. Hot Springs was small enough that everyone knew everyone else's business, and the sight of Preston Ellis walking down Main Street with Felicity Foster to buy supplies at the general store caused considerable speculation. Felicity tried to keep her distance, tried to maintain the walls she had built around her heart, but Preston made it difficult. He had a way of drawing her into conversation, asking about her life before the marriages, her dreams, her favorite books. He told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about leaving home after his parents died in a cholera outbreak, about spending the last 10 years drifting from town to town, working with horses because they were simpler than people. Never wanted to settle down. Felicity asked one evening as they sat on the front porch watching the sun set over the Black Hills. "Never found a reason to," Preston said. "I figured I would know when I found the right place, the right person. Has not happened yet." "Maybe you are the one who is cursed," she said with an attempt at lightness. "Doomed to wander forever. Maybe, or maybe I have just been waiting for something worth stopping for." The way he looked at her when he said it made Felicity's breath catch. She stood abruptly, smoothing her skirts. "I should start on tomorrow's bread. The dough needs to rise overnight." "Felicity," Preston said, and it was the first time he had used her first name. "I am not afraid of you." "Then you are a fool," she said, but her voice was soft, almost tender. 3 husbands, Preston. 3 graves in the cemetery. I will not add a 4th. "Good thing I am not asking to marry you," he said easily. "Just to sit here and watch the sunset." She hesitated, then sat back down, and they watched the sky turn gold and crimson in companionable silence. As summer deepened into August, Felicity found herself looking forward to Preston's return each evening with an eagerness that frightened her. She started paying more attention to her appearance, wearing her better dresses, letting her hair down instead of pinning it up severely. She caught herself laughing at his stories, sharing her own, letting the conversation drift into the night until Mrs. Calloway coughed meaningfully from her room upstairs. The town's disapproval grew more vocal. Women stopped speaking to her entirely in the street. The pastor's wife made a pointed sermon about the dangers of temptation and the wickedness of women who led good men astray. Felicity tried to ignore it, but the weight of their judgment pressed down on her like stones. Preston noticed, of course. He came back from the ranch one afternoon with a split lip and bruised knuckles. "What happened?" Felicity demanded, dragging him into the kitchen and pressing a cold cloth to his face. "Had a disagreement with one of the ranch hands," Preston said. "Fellow seemed to think he could say some unpleasant things about you. I disagreed." "Preston, you cannot fight everyone in this town who thinks poorly of me. You would be fighting for the rest of your life." "I do not care what they think," he said firmly. "You have done nothing wrong, and I am tired of watching them treat you like you are something to be feared." "But what if they are right?" The words burst out of her before she could stop them. "What if I am cursed? What if just being near me puts you in danger?" Preston took her hands in his, the cold cloth forgotten. "Felicity, listen to me. I have broken wild horses that wanted nothing more than to kick my skull in. I have ridden through territories where bandits and raiders were a daily threat. I have weathered storms and droughts and every kind of hardship the West can throw at a man. If I was going to die, it would have happened a dozen times over by now. I am not afraid of your supposed curse." "You should be," she whispered, but she did not pull her hands away. "The only thing I am afraid of," Preston said quietly, "is waking up one day and realizing I was too much of a coward to take a chance on something real. Felicity, I have been drifting for 10 years, going from town to town with nothing but my horse and my saddle. I have never wanted to stay anywhere, never wanted to put down roots. Until now. Preston, please do not do this." "Do what?" "Tell you the truth. Tell you that I think about you every minute I am out at that ranch, that coming back here at the end of the day is the best part of my whole life. That I am falling in love with you, and I do not care what the whole damn town has to say about it." Felicity felt tears prick her eyes. "You cannot love me. You do not know what it is like, watching someone you love die, knowing that maybe you caused it." "You did not cause anything," Preston said fiercely. "Accidents happen, Felicity. Horses spook, snakes strike, wagons tip over. None of that was your fault, and carrying that guilt is going to crush you if you let it." "I cannot go through it again," she said, the tears spilling over now. "I cannot bury another husband. I cannot stand at another grave and listen to people whisper about the cursed widow. I cannot, Preston. I cannot." He pulled her into his arms and she collapsed against his chest, sobbing out years of grief and guilt and loneliness. He held her while she cried, stroking her hair, murmuring soft reassurances that might or might not have been true but that she desperately wanted to believe. When her tears finally subsided, she pulled back embarrassed. "I am sorry. I should not have fallen apart like that." "You are allowed to fall apart sometimes," Preston said gently. "And I am honored that you trusted me enough to let me see it." She looked up at him, at this man who had walked into her life just a few weeks ago and somehow managed to slip past every defense she had built. "What are we doing, Preston? I think," he said slowly, "we are figuring out if we are brave enough to take a chance on each other. And if I am not brave enough, then I will wait until you are." The next Sunday, Preston asked Felicity to accompany him to the natural hot springs pools on the edge of town. It was a bold invitation, essentially announcing to the entire town that they were courting, but Felicity found herself saying yes before she could talk herself out of it. They walked together through the warm morning, Preston carrying a basket with bread and cheese and apples. The thermal pools bubbled and steamed in the sunlight, the water a milky turquoise from the minerals dissolved in it. The air smelled of sulfur and sage, and birds sang in the cottonwood trees that lined the banks. "My first week here, I did not understand why anyone would build a town around hot springs," Preston said as they found a smooth rock to sit on near the water's edge. "Then I spent a day breaking a particularly stubborn Mustang, got thrown 3 times and landed on my back, and someone suggested I try the springs. Best medicine I ever had." The Lakota people have been using these springs for healing for generations, Felicity said. They consider them sacred. When I first came here with Thomas, I used to sit by the water and feel like maybe I could leave my troubles behind. Seems foolish now. It is not foolish to want peace, Preston said. He opened the basket and handed her a piece of bread. Tell me about them. Your husbands. If you want to, I mean. I would like to know about the men you loved. Felicity was quiet for a moment, surprised by the request. Most people avoided mentioning her dead husbands as if they were something shameful. But Preston's interest seemed genuine, so she took a breath and began. Thomas was young like me, maybe too young. We both thought we knew what love was, but I think now we were just lonely and excited by the idea of adventure. He was kind, though, gentle. He used to read to me in the evenings, poetry mostly. When he died, I thought my world had ended. She paused, tearing the bread into small pieces. James was different. Older, steadier. He offered security more than romance, and I think I was looking for someone to make me feel safe after losing Thomas. He worked hard, probably too hard. He was exhausted the day that snake bit him, not paying as much attention as he should have been. And the third, William. Felicity's voice was soft. He was a good man. He knew about Thomas and James, knew about the talk in town, and he married me anyway. He said he did not believe in curses, only in choices. We had almost a year together, and I started to think maybe the curse was broken. Then the accident at the warehouse happened, and I realized that hope was the cruelest thing of all. Preston reached over and took her hand. They were lucky men to have had your love even for a short time. They were dead men, Felicity said bitterly. And they died because of me. No, they died because life is fragile and unpredictable. You loved them and they loved you, and that is not something to regret. Even if loving me is dangerous, Felicity, just being alive is dangerous. We are not promised tomorrow, any of us. The question is whether we spend today afraid or whether we grab onto the good things when we find them. She looked at him, at this cowboy with the Texas drawl and the steady hands and the kind eyes. You really do not believe in the curse. I believe that you have had terrible luck. I believe that you have suffered more than anyone should have to suffer. But I do not believe that loving you brings death. He squeezed her hand gently. I believe that loving you might be the best thing that ever happened to a man if he was brave enough to try. And are you brave enough? They say I am cursed, 3 husbands gone, Preston said quietly, echoing her earlier words back to her. That is what you would tell any man who showed interest in you, is that not it? Yes, she whispered. Well, I say 4th time's divine. Maybe the 4th man is the one who breaks the pattern. Maybe I am that man, Felicity. And if you will let me, I would like to find out. She wanted to say no. She wanted to protect him, protect herself, protect them both from the inevitable heartbreak. But looking into his eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand around hers, she found she could not. She was tired of being afraid, tired of being alone, tired of letting other people's fears dictate her life. I would like that too, she said finally, and Preston's smile was bright enough to rival the summer sun. They spent the rest of the day by the springs, talking and laughing and simply being together. Preston told her about his childhood in Texas, about his favorite horse who had carried him safely across 3 states, about the different ranches where he had worked. Felicity talked about her parents, both gone now, about the boarding house and her small attempts to make it a home, about the books she read late at night when sleep would not come. When they finally walked back to the boarding house as evening approached, they passed several townspeople who stared with undisguised shock and disapproval. Felicity felt her spine stiffen, but Preston simply tipped his hat politely and kept walking, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. That evening, after supper, Preston helped her with the dishes, as had become his habit. The other boarders had retired to their rooms, leaving them alone in the kitchen. "The town is going to make trouble for you," Felicity said quietly, scrubbing a pot with more force than necessary. "For us, let them try." "I am serious, Preston. They ran off the last man who showed interest in me. Told him he would end up dead within the year if he married me. He left town the next day." Preston dried a plate and set it carefully on the shelf. "I am not going anywhere, Felicity, not unless you ask me to leave." "Why?" The question burst out of her. "Why are you so determined to do this? You could have any woman in any town, women without histories, without reputations, without dead husbands buried in the cemetery. Why me?" He set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who has been broken and put herself back together 3 times over. I see someone who gets up every morning and faces a town that hates her, and does it with grace and dignity. I see someone who is kind to her boarders even when they gossip about her, who makes sure everyone has enough to eat, who tends to the little details that make a house a home. I see strength, Felicity. Real strength, not the blustering kind that men show off. The quiet kind that endures." Felicity felt her eyes fill with tears again. "You make me sound better than I am." "I do not think that is possible." Preston reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I am falling in love with you, Felicity Foster. Maybe I have already fallen. And I am not going to apologize for it or hide it or let anyone tell me I am wrong." "Preston," she breathed. And then he was kissing her, soft and sweet and tender, and she was kissing him back, her wet hands coming up to grip his shirt, pulling him closer. It had been 2 years since anyone had kissed her. 2 years since she had let herself feel anything beyond grief and guilt, and the sudden rush of emotion was overwhelming. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "Is this all right?" "I should have asked first." "It is more than all right," Felicity said. "It is perfect. You are perfect." "I am definitely not perfect," Preston said with a laugh. "But I am yours if you will have me." "I will have you," she said, and kissed him again. The next weeks passed in a blur of happiness that Felicity had forgotten was possible. Preston finished his work at the Reynolds Ranch, but instead of moving on to the next town as he had originally planned, he took a job at the livery stable in Hot Springs. He kept his room at the boarding house, and every evening he and Felicity would find excuses to be together, talking long into the night, stealing kisses in the kitchen or on the front porch. The town's disapproval intensified. The pastor gave a sermon about the wages of sin. Women crossed the street when they saw Felicity coming. Someone left a note tacked to her front door warning Preston that he was courting death. He tore it down and burned it without comment. "They will not leave us alone," Felicity said one evening in late September as they sat together on the porch swing. The air had turned cooler, and she was wrapped in a shawl while Preston's arm around her shoulders provided additional warmth. "Then we will leave," Preston said simply. She looked at him in surprise. "What? If they will not let us be happy here, we will go somewhere else. I have been thinking about it anyway. The livery stable is fine work, but it is not what I want to do forever. I have some money saved, and you could sell this boarding house. We could buy a small ranch, start our own horse breeding operation. Make a fresh start somewhere where nobody knows about curses or dead husbands. You would do that. Leave Hot Springs. Felicity, I would go anywhere with you. Hot Springs, California, Canada, does not matter to me. What matters is that we are together." She turned to face him fully. "You are talking about marriage. Eventually, if you will have me. I know it is soon, and I know you have reasons to be cautious. But yes, when you are ready, I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want children if you do, and a home, and all the ordinary beautiful things that make a life worth living. And if the curse is real, she asked softly, what if marrying me kills you like it killed the others? Preston took both her hands in his. Then I will die the happiest man in the West, knowing I spent my last days loving you, but I do not think it will come to that. I think we are going to have a long, happy life together, Felicity. I think we are going to prove everyone wrong. She looked at him, at this stubborn, wonderful man who had refused to be scared away and made her decision. Ask me. What? Ask me to marry you right now, before I lose my nerve. Preston's eyes widened, then he broke into a huge smile. He slid off the swing and onto one knee on the porch boards, still holding her hands. Felicity Foster, will you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife? I do not have a ring yet, and this is probably the least romantic proposal in history, but I promise to spend every day of the rest of my life trying to make you happy. Yes, Felicity said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, Preston Ellis, I will marry you. He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she clung to him. And for the first time in years, Felicity felt truly, completely happy. They decided to marry quickly and quietly before the town could organize any serious opposition. The pastor refused to perform the ceremony, but they found a traveling minister 2 towns over who agreed to marry them in early October. They invited no one, simply stood in the small church with 2 strangers as witnesses and pledged themselves to each other. Felicity wore a simple blue dress, having burned the blood-stained wedding dress the night before in a small private ceremony of letting go. Preston wore his best shirt and a new vest, and when he slipped a simple gold band on her finger, his hand was steady and sure. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the minister said. You may kiss your bride. Preston cupped Felicity's face in his hands and kissed her thoroughly, and she kissed him back, putting into it all the hope and love and desperate prayer that this time would be different. They returned to Hot Springs as Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, and the town reacted with predictable horror. Women whispered that Preston Ellis was a dead man walking. Men shook their heads at his foolishness. The general store owner refused to serve them until Preston calmly pointed out that his money was as good as anyone else's. Even Mrs. Calloway moved out of the boarding house, declaring that she would not live under the same roof as a woman who was clearly tempting fate. Good riddance, Preston said that evening as they cleared out the old woman's room together. Maybe now I can kiss my wife in my own house without someone coughing disapprovingly. Our house, Felicity corrected with a smile, and you can kiss your wife whenever you want. Is that so? Preston pulled her close. Then I want to do it right now. That night, in the room that had been Preston's and was now theirs together, Felicity lay in her husband's arms and tried not to think about how this was how it had started the other 3 times. The happiness, the hope, the certainty that this time would be different. But Preston's heartbeat was steady under her ear, his breathing deep and even, and gradually she let herself relax into sleep. She woke in the middle of the night to find him still there, still breathing,